Hey there, welcome back. Just to give you a little background about myself, my name is Glauco Pires. I've been making games since 2010, and throughout all of these years in the game industry, I've learned how to make games in several different technologies like Unity, Unreal. I've made HTML5 games, Flash games, I've used Construct 2. So I have a lot of experience by using these tools and working with different programming languages, and this experience is going to be shared with you in this course in a very nice and steady way. Okay, we're going to learn different topics on game making one by one. Okay, so now we're just going to learn how the Unity editor works. Then later we're going to focus on scripting. And later we're going to work on the actual game logic, okay, on the gameplay things that we need to understand how to work. Okay, and by far Unity is one of the best engines, probably the best engine available there. It's so good to learn making games in Unity. You just have so much fun because things are simple, things are straightforward, and you worry about the game and not about the technology because in general it just works. And once you open Unity, you're going to be seeing this window here. Okay, you can create a new project by clicking on this button, which says New Project, or just going to this New button here. Okay, if you have already some projects in your computer, you should see the list of them in this window, but if you don't, you just press New. Okay, and after we click here, we're going to be taken to another screen where we have to set a few things. So first of all, we need to set the project name. So I'm going to name this runner. Okay, as we're going to keep running to the right and jumping, avoiding obstacles. And the location, it's something very important for us to understand. Okay, we could just put the project name, press create project and get going. But as you keep making games, it is important to have them in a nice organized way. So it's important to have a folder just for your projects. So here in location, I have the users folder, I have my home folder, then I like to call a projects folder. Okay, so my name slash projects. Okay, and in here is where I'm going to put my runner project. Another folder is going to be made in this folder, which is the runner. Okay, and you could name this workspaces or game projects, whatever name you prefer. Just don't drop your projects in the home folder or the documents. All right. And for the rendering mode, we're going to use 3D, even though it's a two-dimensional logic because we keep running to the right or we can also move to the left, but we're going to use 3D art. Okay, this can get very interesting once we use this mode. And after we are done with this, we can just press create project and let Unity do its job. It's now going to prepare all the files that we need to use, and then the Unity editor is going to open. Okay, if this is your first time working with any 3D tools, okay, it could be for 3D modeling or maybe making 3D games in here, it might seem a bit crowded. There might be lots of windows in here, but it's actually pretty simple. We just need to see things one by one and understand how they relate to each other. Okay, so in the left portion of the window, you're going to see that there is a hierarchy tab here. And this hierarchy is basically going to list all of the elements that are going to be in your scene. Okay, notice that I used a few different names here. First of all, scene. Okay, we are in an untitled scene. So scene is like a moment of your game, a snapshot of your game. A scene could be a main menu. Okay, it could be a menu with the buttons play, help, options, or exit, for example. But a scene could also be level 1, okay, level 2, level 3, all of the levels that we're going to build for this game. So it's basically a moment that is going to do something. It could be a credit screen, it could be an option screen, it could be several different things. And a scene is going to contain different elements, but these elements in Unity, they are called game objects. They're the most basic elements that are going to build the game because they behave in a special different way. In this case, we have main camera and directional light. We have two game objects here. And I'm going to go into details on them shortly. Okay. Now here at the middle of the scene of the window, you're going to see that there is a scene window and a game tab. Okay. Let's go to scene first. If you go to scene, you're going to notice that it's a bit different than what we were seeing before. Okay, it's like we are in a virtual world in here, and you notice that there are two icons. And notice that if you select one of these icons, they are highlighted in the hierarchy window as well. Okay, so while the hierarchy shows the data for the scene tab is going to show you the actual visuals of the scene, and you can see the camera, and you can also see the directional light. Okay, you can just click on them and well, we can deal with them as we wish. And another great thing about this scene window is that we have our own camera to navigate around. Okay, this camera is different from the main camera game object that we see in the hierarchy, because if you hold down the right mouse button, notice that your icon changes from a pointer to an eye. And if you move the mouse now, you're able to look around. Okay, you can look to the left, to the right, top, bottom. It's like you're playing a first-person shooter game here in Unity. And if you use some movement keys, which are W, A, S, and D, you can walk around. Okay, it's like we're flying here. It's actually that's what's happening. And we can even use Q and E to move down and up. So if this is your first time doing this, it is interesting to pause and just walk a little bit, fly a little bit about the scene, because it's very important to understand these controls. These help you a lot on seeing what's going on in your game, okay, on positioning elements to weld blocks together, make sure they're going to look nice. Okay, it's very important to learn these controls. And notice, however, that we have a main camera. Okay, as I told you, it's different. It's like we have two cameras here. The scene camera, which is for us, the developers, to look around, but we also have a main camera. And a camera in our scene is very important because this is what is going to render the game for the player. Okay, if you look at the game window, you're going to see this. Okay, it's a static view. We're just looking at the horizon of the skybox. And notice that if you select the camera and you disable it, it's going to say, hey, no cameras are rendering, to show you how important it is to have at least one camera. Okay, in general, we don't have to change anything about this camera or create or add a new camera here because it's going to work by default like this. Okay, and well, the game window is what the players are going to see. So while the scene is what the developers see, okay, we can look around, we can see our elements. The game window is the real deal. What you see here is exactly how the game is going to look like for the players. Okay, and another tab that's very important here is the inspector window. And this window basically shows us details about whatever we have selected. It could be a file or it could be a game object. Notice that if you select the main camera in the hierarchy, you're going to see that the inspector is going to be filled with data regarding that camera. First of all, we start with its name, which is basically main camera, and we have a few other things down here that we don't need to talk about right now. And after the name, you're going to see a list of things, a list of items. These are also very important. Okay, the game object is the most basic and important concept in Unity, but the components are also essential for understanding how a game works. And these items here are called components. They are the things that actually make a game object behave somehow. Okay, so the first component that we see in the main camera is the transform one, and we have three fields we can work with here. We have the position, the rotation, and the scale. And notice that each of these fields, they have three different values, x, y, and z. This happens because we are making a game in 3 dimensions, so we need 3 degrees of movement. We need 3 axes of movement and placement. So if you go to x and swap the 0 to 1, notice in the scene that our camera moved to the right. Okay, we could even put 2, put 3, so the camera is moving to the right. And you notice that if we have the camera selected, we have 3 arrows. Okay, we have a red one, a green one, and a blue one. You can even see a tip of which one of them does. Okay, if you look here at the top right, there is a red element for X, green one for Y, and a Z one for a blue one for Z. So if you change X here, you change the red arrow. If you change Y, you change the green one, and if you change Z, you change the blue one. So we have 3 axes here. The first one, which is X, is the horizontal axis, as you can see here, by moving like this. The Y one is the vertical axis, so you can move things up and down, and the Z one is the depth axis. Okay, right now it's in -10. Okay, we can leave it that way. We're going to change this later. And notice that these arrows, they also appear because we have this tool selected, which is the moving tool. So you can click on these arrows and move the element around. So this allows us to do some fine-tuning in the position of our elements. Okay, we can't just do everything we want by just typing numbers in here. Sometimes we need some creative touch and just move until we find the right value. We need to experiment a lot to try new places until we find what's going to look right. And we also have another tool, which is the rotating tool. Okay, and you notice that if you click it, there are going to be different things in here. Instead of arrows, we have some sort of semicircles that we can click and rotate elements around. Okay, and you're not going to see that right now. Let's expand this camera component, okay, so we can see the lines coming out of the camera. And if we rotate it by clicking on these elements, you're going to notice that the camera is also rotating. The view, what the camera is viewing, is changing completely because we're rotating it. And we can also use these three fields here. And we also have scale that can be used with this third tool. And it's not going to work for the camera because the camera is not a 3D element, it's not a 3D object, but we're going to deal with that later. Okay? And another very important component for the camera is, well, the camera component. Okay, you need it so you're able to see the game. And you're going to see things here like the clear flags, which means we can use a skybox or a solid color. We can change the background color. We can change the field of view for the camera. So there are lots of things that we can change and tune by just looking at the components of a game object and changing the numbers, changing the values. Okay, and the same thing applies for the directional light as well. Okay, we also have position, rotation, scale. We can change the color of the directional light, what's going to be the intensity, the type of the light. All of these things can be adjusted as you work with Unity. And another window that's very important is the project window. Okay, and you notice that in this window there is a folder called assets. Every file that we're going to use in this game is going to be here. So once we use any external 3D models, once we create scripts, once we make materials, animations, and any file that you can imagine is going to be here in the assets folder. So this is super important for us. And finally, something that is going to help us as developers a lot is the console window. This is basically going to show us details about whatever is happening in our code or even in the game itself. So we can see some error messages here. If we do any mistakes in the code, we're going to see it here. We can see warnings, so they're like tips for maybe optimizing something to make the code run faster or to make it run properly. And we can have also some information messages. We can just print some messages here, some text, to see if some parts of the code are being reached, for example. Okay, so well, these are the basics for the Unity editor. You can see lots of other stuff if you go to window, and you can check the animator, you can check other things like the asset store, for example, but it's not the subject for this lesson. Okay, we just want to see the basics of the editor so we can start working in our game, right? And in the next video, what we're going to do is we're going to make a script and start learning how to code with Unity. And one last thing here. Notice that since we changed a few things, our scene that says untitled right now contains an asterisk. It means it has been modified, so it would be wise to save that scene. We can just go to File, select Save Scene, okay, and that window is going to open. And notice that our assets folder is empty right now. So what we want to do is to create a new folder. Let's name this Scenes, okay, and we want to save this as level 1/1. Okay, so we press save, and notice that in the assets folder we now have a scenes folder, and there we go, we have 1-1. Okay, that's our first level. Notice that it has been renamed here and there's no asterisk, so we can rest assured, so we can move on to the next lesson and write the code. See you soon.